And I am excited and amped for this conversation because you do the same thing when I hear you preach or share or teach, or you drop a DM in my Instagram message. I am always like, man, this guy, where did he come from? Y'all, I am excited to introduce you to the one and only Kevin Mullens.
Well, girl, it's an honest. It is not only an honor to be here. Just watching you, not just navigate the social media space, but seeing you, of course, in so many clubhouse rooms and hearing your voice in there. You can get a lot from someone's voice, I think, versus just the visual. But what you're doing, of course, with growing, your business for God conferences, right on down to what God's doing in your podcast and stuff. It's an honor to be here with you today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And when we were talking offline, it's crazy when you feel like you know someone and yet you don't know them at all. I'm like, where do you live? Where are you from? What are you doing? Right. But at the same time, feeling that like utter connectivity. And I know that's a God thing when he pushes us towards other people in that energy field. And so I'm excited because this conversation is going to not only serve each other, I think, but it's really, really going to serve my community of entrepreneurs and trailblazers and so many pastors and people who have a desire to start missions and missionaries and ministries. And yet we also know that there's a component of marketplace. There's a component of stewardship and finances that come alongside that. So I love that you have been cultivating kingdom millionaires, and we want all the juice and the insides on how to do that.
You're talking my language. Every book I've written really has been along the lines of marketplace ministry, especially as it relates to helping believers, I think, break down the barriers and limitations of that sort of poverty and scarcity mindset, helping them understand that, that abundance is advantageous to the kingdom of God. That, I always say Satan doesn't fear someone that's just, born again, but he fears someone that has the resources to actually birth those God dreams, to fund crusades and build schools and take over so many of the cultural mountains I think churches, sometime in the last 100 years just sort of let go of. And so I've always said it like this, Tamra. I believe that biblically, especially if we're talking biblically, that our responsibility on earth is biblically undeniable. And what I mean by that is that I don't believe God just empowers us or influences us just to sit in a church somewhere trying to influence those that are already living a surrendered life. But ultimately, it's understanding that Great Commission, right, is to go into Judea, Samaria, and then to the ends of the world. So if he sent us into the world, when you go look at that word world, the world really translated is simple. It just means world systems. And that's what you're doing in business. That's what we do. That's what I do in business. I always just believe that business for me is just an extension of ministry. And ultimately, I think when God can trust us with larger platforms, you mentioned that word steward. Well, he can see that we're stewarding our current resources, managing our current resources, right on down to managing hardship and crisis and adversity. I think then God can trust us with higher levels of influence and bigger platforms. And I think it's when we reach those platforms that we can really be a megaphone on the behalf of advancing the kingdom.
So good. And I think a lot of times people inhibit themselves because they think of like just good enough, right? And I think that that's a church mentality of like, I have enough. I've gotten enough provision that I have what I need and that's good enough. But I really believe that the desires of the people's hearts and why even entertainment and arts industries and the culture is so attuned to fortune and fame, it has nothing to do with the selfish desires, though that's how it's manifested itself, but more so that God has put that desire in our hearts so that we actually draw near to him. We draw near to his ability and his overflow of fortune and his fame in our lives. And yet it's been pulled and detracted that if you have money or if you have fortune or if you have fame, and it's not glorifying God, that it is a negative thing. And it should always glorify God, but the people are utilizing it and manipulating it as conjuring it up as money is the root of all evil, right? And that verse that's not actually a verse that people just say is a verse because they have pulled it out of context, right? Talk to us through like, how can we break that ministry mentality, that money mentality?